those that listen to this show know that I've long supported Clay Holmes.
Yes.
But there has to be a point where you go, if we're going to win a World Series, we're going to have much better closing than what Clay Holmes has given us. So that's 10 blown saves. Now everybody's saying, well, if he had saved half of those games, the Yankees should have won 2 out of 3 against the Tigers. But instead, you lose that game, Don, and now all of a sudden you're 3-3 on what was supposed to be an easy road trip through Chicago and Detroit.
You look at Chicago and Detroit, and you're like 3-3, really? Like I couldn't believe they lost a game to Chicago.
Right. And then they got embarrassed in that game.
That was completely embarrassed. And then you drop 2 out of 3. I figured, okay, they're going to just go sweep through Detroit. Didn't do that. And
also, look at their offense. They didn't score at all.
And you made a mistake against the kid. What was how many at-bats did he have in a major league? Like he's just a kid.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm sorry. One mistake, that's all it takes.
Yeah,
Chapman made one mistake against the Astros.
That does not get you off the hook. One mistake is too many mistakes because you're there. You're walking a tightrope over high buildings right now. One mistake means you fall plummeting to the earth and you die. You lose a game. So, the questions to Boone after the game, I think, are somewhat unfair. Well, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to have a new closer? They can't go to Walmart and go to the closer aisle. Now, what they're going to have to do, I think, Don, you can't let him close every single game. You've got to mix and match.
Right.
If you have to bring in Tommy Kahnle to close games, if you have to bring in Tim Hill to close games, if you have to bring in anybody else, you can't always be automatically go to Clay Holmes. He's blown 10 saves now. Now, I'd say 3 of the 10, he's been victimized by soft contact. But I'm sorry, if you're watching that game yesterday, Don, that's not soft contact. That's bad. That's a bad job.
No, he
did a bad job.
It's an awful job. And even the errors that were committed back in the day, Michael, in the Orioles series, like you put the guys on to where those mistakes can happen. I mean, you can't do it. It's an issue for sure. I'd like to see somebody else do it, and maybe you catch some lightning in a bottle, or what you're going to end up having to do once you make the playoffs, and you know you're going to make the playoffs, just depends on whether you're going to be the division champion or the wild card, is that you're probably going to have to see there might be games where Cole has to come in to get the final 3 outs. The way the Giants won the World Series with Madison Bumgarner. Like, you're going to have to start thinking outside the box because I don't think you could trust him. 10 blown saves? That's the most since Dave Righetti had 13. What was that, back in 88?
Yep.
I mean, that's a long time, Michael. And so
it's a lot of blown saves.
And a lot more opportunities to blow even more saves if things continue the way they're going.
And then, reading social media yesterday after the game, this is what Cashman gets for not getting a big-time closer at the trade deadline. Tell me the big-time closer that got traded. Tell me. Did the Guardians trade Emmanuel Clase and I missed it? No, they didn't. There was no big-time closer available. The best one was the kid from Miami, and he went to San Diego, who gave up a king's ransom for him. You got to stop. If you say you shouldn't have gone into the season with Clay Holmes, that's a different argument. But say at the trade deadline they didn't get a big-time closer. I didn't see any big-time closers traded. There's one big – my son was asking me, who's the best closer? I said the best closer is probably Emmanuel Clase. Mm-hmm. And the Guardians have a great bullpen. Yankees start a 3-game set against them tomorrow. The Mets start a 3-game set against the Orioles today. We'll get to the Mets in a bit. But that's a tough loss. I'm sorry. That's a really tough loss. Stroman has fixed himself. Last 2 starts, he's looked great. And the bottom line is he gave them 6 shutout innings, turned a 1-0 lead over the bullpen, and the bullpen did a good job in the 7th and the 8th. And then you have your throat ripped out by Clay Holmes. And again, I'm not ripping Clay Holmes as a person. He's a terrific guy. He has not done a great job as a closer this year. And I think you've got to recalibrate at this point and start to close by committee and just mix and match and see who's coming up. And that's how you decide to close. If you're going to be obstinate and you're going to be stubborn and say all the time, you know what? We're going to have Clay Holmes. Do you envision Clay Holmes being the exclusive closer in the Yankees winning the World Series that way?
No, I don't see it.
Well, I mean, then they've got to think up a better way. You can't lose games like that, Don. You can't lose games like that.
Especially against the opponent. You had 6 games against 2 of the worst teams in baseball, a 3-game series against maybe the worst team in the history of baseball, and you walk away 3-3. That's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
And the Tigers don't have great pitching. Now, yesterday they had a great pitcher, Tarek Skubal.
Yeah,
he's great. He might win the Cy Young Award.
They did a little wild though.
A little wild.
Yeah,
and they worked the count, so I give them credit. That's why they got him out after 6. But you look at the amount of runs they scored against the Detroit Tigers pitching staff.
Yeah.
I mean, you're kidding me? They get shut out on Saturday.
And the White Sox, it cosmetically looked better because of the tack-on runs they had in that third game of the series.
And they almost lost that game.
Yeah.
They were trailing 2-1 in the seventh.
Those games were a little close. The games that they won, a little closer than maybe you wanted to against a team that might lose 120 games this year.